This week we're visiting the Nelson Atkins Art Museum in Kansas City, Missouri, where they had a special exhibit called Castles, Cottages, and Crime that I found incredibly interesting. This collection includes just over 24 ceramic cottages, castles, and other buildings that were given to the museum in 1978 by a widower of a local collector, and these were on view for the first time in over 25 years. The exhibit has closed, but we can still go check it out. In the mid-1800s, these little ceramic burners became all the rage in Britain. They are very similar to our incense and wax burners of today, and these buildings were made by all the main Staffordshire potteries in England, and they were aimed at the middle-class consumer. They served two purposes. They made the very stinky Victorian homes smell better, and they were inexpensive decorations for fireplace mantles or china cabinets. These ornaments were designed to be seen from the front. The back was flat and undecorated, which made them much cheaper. You would put a piece of charcoal or a wooden disc that had been dipped in essential oils inside the house and light it, and the fragrant smoke would rise up from the chimneys and make your house smell better. This mantel is set up with some decorative items. We have an 1887 porcelain bust of Queen Victoria, and next to her is an 1830 bust of Sir Walter Raleigh. And again, there's one of those little burners on this mantel. And next to that is what looks like a statue of Victoria and Albert, but it's actually their eldest daughter, Victoria, Princess Royal, and her husband, Frederick William of Prussia, who would become German Emperor and King of Prussia for 99 days between March and June of 1888. And they were the parents of Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last German emperor. The 1500s and the 1600s fascinated Victorian England, and by the middle of the 1800s, William Shakespeare was venerated as one of England's greatest writers. And here's an interesting story. P.T. Barnum, who was the American sideshowman, tried to buy the Shakespeare House in 1846 and ship it to America. The British government said no. They purchased the house for the nation for £3,000, or about £475,000 today. One of the more gruesome uses of these ceramics was that they were used to commemorate sites of famous murders. So just like today, true crime fascinates the public. The gorier the better, right? Every week, the London papers reported sensationalized stories to a mass audience. Nothing sold like murder, and we're going to look at two of them today. In November of 1848, James Bloomfield Rush had been leasing Potash Farm near Norwich, England from Isaac Jeremy for 12 years for $5,000 plus interest, and it was due on November 30th. Potash Farm was a part of the Stanfield estate that was owned by Jeremy. Rush was broke, so he decided to murder his landlord rather than pay his debts. Rush's complicated scheme involved disguising himself to divert suspicion onto some distant Jeremy relatives who were claiming to be the rightful heirs of the Stanfield estate. On the night of November 28th, Rush broke into Stanfield Hall, fatally shooting Isaac Jeremy and his son, and wounding Jeremy's daughter-in-law and the housekeeper. The ensuing trial, in which Rush acted as his own attorney, created a sensation, including the revelation that Rush's governess, Emily Sanford, who had provided him with a false alibi, was pregnant with his child. He was convicted of double murder, and he was hung at Norwich Castle in 1849. Within a year, multiple potteries produced commemorative ornaments of the major sites of the case, including Potash Farm and Stanfield Hall. They even produced porcelain figures of Rush and Sanford. William Palmer, also known as the Rugeley Poisoner or the Prince of Poisoners, was an English doctor found guilty of murder in one of the most notorious cases of the 19th century. Charles Dickens called Palmer the greatest villain that ever stood in the Old Bailey. Palmer was convicted for the 1855 murder of his friend John Cook and was executed in public by hanging the following year. He had poisoned Cook with strychnine and was suspected of poisoning several other people, including his wife, brother, and his mother-in-law, as well as 4 of his children, who died of convulsions before their first birthdays. Palmer made large sums of money from the death of his wife and brother after collecting on the insurance. And just after the hanging, you could buy a piece of the noose and a few months later, a commemorative ceramic burner. All the information in this video came directly from the museum plaques, but I was interested in knowing more. And if you're interested in learning more about these 2 murders, I've left some links to some various websites in the description. Thanks for joining me today. Next week, we are back exploring historical sites here in Kansas and Missouri. I hope to see you then. Bye now.